Hi, and thanks for joining me. And thank you to my sponsor, Kathleen Wayland of Wayland Financial in downtown LaSalle. She's always had my back, and she'll have yours too. When Dr. Jerry Corcoran retired after a long and distinguished career at Illinois Valley Community College, the person chosen as his replacement was going to have to meet some high expectations, which meant they had to hire an exceptional person, one who's part administrator, part educator, part PR person, maybe the toughest one, part visionary. And Dr. Tracy Morris is just getting underway in this job, so it would be foolish and really unfair to her to set expectations for her to that level. But she did very generously give me an hour of her time recently in her new office as IVCC president. So new that the boxes weren't even unpacked yet, and I think they had just finished painting. But she was sharp and graceful under the pressure of her new position, and I'm sure that in no small part that's because of her past. You see, she is herself the first alumna to lead the school. She was the first person in her family to achieve the levels of education that she's earned through years of hard work and study. She was the first compliance officer for a community college in the state of Illinois over Joliet. She's of this area, but she's also achieved great things so far in her career that it's no wonder she was picked for this position. And it's no wonder that I have far too much interesting footage from our interview to include it all in this episode, so I'll be splitting this up over a couple of weekends. It's typical at the start of a story to communicate one's path to this point. Often it's a quick summary, but in Dr. Tracy Morris's case, her story to date is so interesting, so compelling, so telling, and so vital to what we can hope to see for her in the future that it deserves its own installment right here today. So here then is just the start of what I hope you'll agree is the story of a remarkable person.
Years ago, my first memory of IVCC is at my mom's nurse pinning. And I was about 9 years old-ish. And I remember looking up at my mom and thinking, wow, she's pretty. And she was in her white uniform with the hat like they used to wear for nurse pinning. And at that time, I had no idea what she had been through. She was a single mom of three, with three kids after she and my dad split. And she worked so hard. She studied at night in the closet with a flashlight. We received assistance because that's what we needed to do to survive. So I didn't know that. I thought, wow, she's pretty. Years later, as I've watched students come through our nursing program, this is a common story. And the more I learn from our students, the more I understand what my mom went through. So way back when, in the 80s, that's what I remember. When it came time for me to graduate and go to school, I wasn't really sure where I was going to go. I really thought business was the way I was going to go, and never had taken a business class other than the intro at the high school. And I came to IVCC because I wasn't really sure where I was going to go, and that's what we could afford, was to come to IB. And it was transformative. I had some legends. Gil Meyer as my psychology teacher, Ed Krolek as my English teacher, Jerry and Nell, Mr. Boswell, Mr. Hoster, just some teachers that introduced me to a whole different viewpoint in life. So I changed my major to psychology almost immediately. And then when I got to Western, decided, wow, I'd really like to be a teacher like these teachers I had. And so that's kind of where my formative experience here, I didn't realize it at the time, but I wasn't really the best student. I wasn't bad, but I could have been a lot more. But I had teachers who made learning fun. And so when it came time for me to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was like, I want to be a teacher who makes learning fun. So I got my degree in psychology and education with a minor in English, homage to Ed Krolek, and went to work at Mendota High School. Was hired after I completed my student teaching and taught there for 5 years, and realized that I always wanted to be a counselor. But I decided I really wanted to be a guidance counselor and talk to people about what they want to do when they grow up. And so earned my master's degree from Northern Illinois University and was offered a job in Anawan, Illinois, as the first ever kindergarten through 8th grade guidance counselor. Kindergarten through 8th grade was not my age group. That was my specialty. I loved it. It was fun, but I love the older students. So when a job came open at IVCC, someone said, take a look at it. What do you think? I was hired as a counselor and orientation coordinator, which was a new grant-funded position, and kind of got my toe in the door and was super excited doing that job. And at the time, Dr. Bob Marshall, who was my vice president, said, I think you can do more. what do you think about getting your doctorate? I'm like, no, I'm good. Was selected as the director of admissions and records, and then he continued to say, hey, what do you think about getting your degree? And he would put flyers on my desk, and he would remind me. He's like, you would be a great VP someday, before I ever believed in myself. And so with his encouragement and support, I went on to Northern for my educational doctorate in adult and higher ed, and then eventually was selected as the vice president of student development at ICC after being an associate VP here. So kind of took a little circuitous route, but ICC is a larger campus, more diverse, but more importantly, I saw new ways to do things and worked in we used Six Sigma as a process improvement and just had some really great experiences. Led me to Joliet to do something completely different as a compliance officer. And a new challenge at that point in my career. All of that gave me the opportunity to be here, which is just amazing for me. I was the first compliance officer in the state of Illinois for a community college. So Dr. Mitchell at Joliet had a great vision for the need for someone at an institutional level to be, overseeing, not necessarily doing all the nuts and bolts, but overseeing institutional compliance. And I had always kind of hoped that maybe I would be able to come back and be positioned to be at least considered for the president of IVCC. I love this school. I love what it's done for my family, for myself. So I'd always kind of hoped that. But at that point in my career, it was just such a unique opportunity as the first one. And I had enough of a background in code of conduct and Title IX that I threw my hat in the ring to see, with the hope that maybe it would help me to be a president. But then as I dug in, I realized that there was a lot I didn't know, even after 15 years as a professional. And so it really drove me to learn a whole different aspect of higher ed, which then really helped me as I prepped for this position. It started off just making sure we were on time in our reporting. That's kind of why I was brought in, to make sure that we were hitting all of our deadlines. Then as I got into the role, Dr. Mitchell and then Dr. Demuo after her allowed me a lot of latitude to really do deep dives into certain areas. So we did accessibility audits across campus to see, are we accessible to individuals with disabilities? We did deep dives into Title IX. A part of that was required by the law. We did deep dives into when we were renegotiating and realigning academic programs. They brought me in to make sure that we were hitting the requirements for notifications. So I learned pieces that I never anticipated when I took the job. And then my position was moved into the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Compliance office, kind of just as a place to kind of help to realign the organization. And I got a whole new opportunity to participate in DEI work that I'd never had before. And that was really something that got me out of my office and helped me build connections. And then when somebody would have an issue, they knew who I was and they felt more comfortable coming to me. So it was an added benefit, but it was also just really fun work to do. It's hard work, but it's fun work to do. So it's been a very interesting route, but it's been a fun journey, and I've never been bored.
If you're listening to this on the radio or online, you should know that this is just the audio part of a video-based feature. You can check it out at the Starved Rock Media YouTube channel. Back now to more of my interview with new IVCC President Dr. Tracy Morris.
I think that as a student services professional, which is where I began my career, we generally have that close connection with students, and we realize how important it is for students to feel welcome, for students to see themselves around them. They want to see teachers who look like them, who are similar to them, whether that's age, whether that's ethnicity, whether that's where they came from. Having students feel as though they belong and truly to belong is extremely important. Sometimes when you get into buzzwords with DEI, people get very offended that you're going to take away their beliefs and values, and that isn't it at all. It is about embracing and opening our minds to learn. And so that piece was ingrained in me early in my life, but then seeing the tactical value of it at work and having people feel involved in the conversations. So it is as simple as we're going to build a building, making sure we ask our facilities, what does this look like to clean? Asking our IT staff, what do we need for power and technology? That diversity of thought is different than what most people think of as diversity, but it's those conversations and being inclusive and then really sitting and listening. So sometimes I've seen as a leader now versus where I was maybe 10, 12 years ago when I left IVCC, 9 years ago even for sure, being much more mindful in my thoughts. And it takes a little longer to make decisions. But when you ask people to come to the table, then you really owe them the responsibility to listen, whether that's our students or our employees or our community.
Well, I was going to say mindfulness seems to be what it's all about. And I have a question. Do you see, as far as other elements of diversity, do you see more of that around the college than you used to, or do you see less of it? What areas do you want to focus on to ensure increased diversity?
I really think we are seeing our Hispanic population grow significantly. Our African American population is growing, not quite as rapidly. So I think that brings with it opportunities to broaden our support for students of color. I think we are seeing more and more first-generation students who are coming to us who no one in their family has gone to college. I was one. My mom had her associate's degree before I graduated from high school, but the technical definition is a bachelor's degree. They didn't know how to help me when I went to Western. That was all new territory. And so now higher ed is much more mindful of creating programs to say, wow, you're the first in your family to go to college. How can we help you? Maybe parents don't speak English or it's their second language and they're limited. How can we support those parents so that they can be involved in the process for their son or daughter or their child in a different way? And then also embracing those students who are parents, and how can we have their children be a part of their education? So having a partnership with the YMCA on campus to provide some level of childcare has been a long journey from when we used to have basically full-time childcare to not being able to sustain that. Now we're trying to find ways to bring those kids back to campus and support the parents as they come to school. So all of those aspects, I really think, make our campus much more rich.
What does 100 years look like around here? What are you going to do?
Oh, it's so amazing. We're just in the beginning of the formation. So I'm hoping to kick off the celebrations this fall with what's called an investiture ceremony, which is similar to an inauguration, not quite as fancy as what you might think of as a presidential inauguration at the federal level, but it's a ceremony, and it's a celebration of your past history and your future. And so that will be kind of the kickoff. It'll be shortly after our 99 years of offering classes anniversary. So we're looking in September. That will be kind of the kickoff for the 100-year celebration. Throughout that year, there are several things. We're going to look at a few different events. Spoiler alert, one of them will probably be a euchre tournament because many of us in the Illinois Valley learned how to play euchre here in the cafeteria.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. That is where I learned how as well, and some people will say I learned it better than others will say. But I thought that would be a great fun homage to that piece of history. The other events are still kind of information, so I don't want to commit to anything that we haven't already done, but I see a celebration of different groups. Maybe not a traditional homecoming. We've tried that once before, kind of a little bit of mixed reviews, but bringing people back to campus to see how we've grown. But more importantly, telling the stories. Like, I love my IVCC story. I tell it every chance I get, and now people listen. But there are so many other stories. When I'm walking through the grocery store, people will stop me and say, hey, I went to IVCC. Here's my story. We've had extremely successful alumni. When the hospitals were here, 90% of your nurses were probably IVCC graduates. If you get pulled over by a police officer, pretty good chance it's an IVCC graduate. Our teachers, bankers, so many people in the community have ties to IVCC, and I don't think we tell that story enough. So my role as a president is to not only share my story, but to hear everyone else's. So I have a few different ideas of how we can spotlight those and how we can talk about how IVCC was a part of people's lives. So then our official 100 years will be in April of 2024. And then we'll keep celebrating, just like Disney does. I'm a big Disney fan, as you can tell. Keep celebrating until we hit 101. So lots of different events, bringing people back together, celebrating the stories and what IVCC brings to our community. So talk about bringing the community back into the college. That's really what we are looking to do.
Next time, I'll share more of what I thought was an interview that was really interesting and fun to do. Thanks again to Kathleen Whalen of Whalen Financial in downtown LaSalle for sponsoring this multimedia project. Now, if you have an idea of a topic or a person you'd like me to take a look at for Tom's Take, I'm all ears. Doesn't just have to be opinion. It can be fun stuff like this. Call WLPO at 815-223-3100 and ask for the newsroom. Till then, I'll talk to you in the morning.